He publicly humiliated me, so I destroyed his reputation. He called me pathetic. Not in a quiet corner, not in a hushed whisper, but out loud, in front of all his friends, his colleagues, his audience. The word hung in the air, a cruel, barbed hook. And then came the laughter, a sharp collective sound that echoed in my ears long after it died down. He probably expected a scene, right? A screaming match, maybe tears, a dramatic exit. He was wrong. So utterly, completely wrong. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. Instead, a strange calm settled over me, a stillness I hadn't known I possessed. I looked at him, at his smug, preening face, so pleased with himself, basking in the glow of his little victory. And I smiled. Just a small, almost imperceptible curve of the lips. And as he continued to hold court, oblivious, I quietly pulled out my phone, opened a new note, and began to type. A to-do list, if you will. He had no idea what was coming, because real revenge doesn't announce itself with a bang. It arrives quietly, meticulously, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. If you've ever felt that sting of public shame, if you believe karma is a dish best served absolutely unequivocally cold, then you need to hit that like button and subscribe, because you're going to want to see how this story ends. Trust me, it's a masterclass in silent demolition. Let's rewind a couple of years, shall we? Picture this. I'm Margaret, then 27, fresh-faced and full of ambition, a junior copywriter at this cool boutique advertising agency nestled in the heart of Chicago. We were known for our edgy campaigns and our killer coffee machine. Life felt pretty good. Then came Alex. He was 30, impeccably polished, oozing charm from every pore, and the undeniable king of the creative department. He had that effortless confidence, that easy laugh that made everyone gravitate towards him. We first crossed paths, as fate would have it, in the break room, locked in a silent standoff over the very last packet of hazelnut creamer. He broke the tension with a dazzling smile and a joke about how I now owed him coffee for life. I, ever the wordsmith, shot back that I'd repay him in brilliant slogans. It was a classic meet cute, straight out of a rom-com. 6 months later, we were moving into a cozy apartment together, a place with exposed brick and a fire escape view of the city lights. Everyone at the office, from the interns to the senior partners, called us the power couple, the agency's golden duo. But to me, we weren't just a power couple. We were home. He was home. Alex, bless his heart, absolutely loved hosting game night. Every Thursday, without fail, our apartment would transform into a lively hub, thick with the scent of craft IPAs and my famous buffalo chicken dip. I loved watching him in his element, holding court, his face lighting up as his college buddies roared with laughter at his spot-on impressions and elaborate stories. He was truly charismatic, and I was so incredibly proud of him. Too proud, it turned out, to notice that this pride, this admiration, only ever seemed to flow in one direction. My accomplishments, my small victories often felt diminished in his presence or quickly overshadowed by his own. The first real flicker of unease, the first significant red flag, came during one of these very game nights. We were playing some obscure European board game, and I, in my attempt to be sophisticated, mispronounced charcuterie. It happens, right? English isn't exactly a phonetic language, but Alex, instead of a gentle correction later, chose that moment in front of the entire group to loudly and condescendingly correct me. "It's charcuterie, babe," he'd said, drawing out each syllable with an exaggerated flourish. Then, with a dismissive wave of his hand and a condescending smirk, he added, "Don't worry, though. That's why you're in copy and I'm in strategy. Different skill sets, you know." The room erupted in laughter. And what did I do? I laughed along. Because if you can't take a joke, you're the buzzkill, the party pooper, the one who ruins the fun, right? That's what I told myself anyway. But that night as I lay in bed, the laughter still echoing in my head, I found myself compulsively Googling how to be less sensitive. I chastised myself for letting such a small thing bother me. I really should have been Googling how to spot a narcissist, or maybe even covert narcissism red flags. That little incident, seemingly harmless, was a tiny crack in the foundation of home, a preview of the casual cruelty that would eventually shatter it. It was the first time I felt that familiar sting of public humiliation, a feeling that would soon become all too familiar. Fast forward 2 more years, past countless game nights and subtle put-downs, to a particularly snowy February evening. The kind of night where the city lights shimmer through a veil of falling flakes, making everything feel a little magical, a little cozy. We were hosting what Alex proudly declared was the biggest game night of the year, the Super Bowl of Settlers of Catan. The stakes were high, the snacks were plentiful, and the guest list was interesting. Alex's boss, Evelyn, the formidable executive creative director of the agency, was there, bringing her sharp wit and even sharper business acumen. And, to my mild annoyance, so was Alex's ex-girlfriend, Chloe, who was now, apparently, just a good friend. I was in the kitchen, meticulously arranging a platter of gourmet sliders, trying to get the little pickles just right, when it happened. Through the thin drywall, I heard my name, distinctly. And then Alex's voice, amplified by the open-plan living room, dripping with a false concern that curdled my stomach even before I heard the words. Margaret's idea got rejected again, he announced, his tone a mock sympathetic sigh. My hands, poised over the perfect mini burger, froze. A cold dread seeped into my bones. I knew instinctively that whatever came next wouldn't be good. She's great at tiny banner ads, though, he continued, a patronizing chuckle in his voice. But big picture thinking, honestly, it's just pathetic. Pathetic. The word hung in the air like smoke, acrid and suffocating. It wasn't just a word. It was a judgment, a dismissal, a public flaying of my professional worth and, by extension, my very character. Then came the laughter. Not gentle chuckles, but sharp, collective peals of mirth, like 1,000 tiny knives twisting into my sternum. It was the sound of my world collapsing, piece by painful piece. My hands, still clutching the slider tray, started to tremble. I waited. I literally held my breath, waiting for someone, anyone, to push back, to say, "Hey, that's not cool," or, "Alex, that's a bit much." But no one did. The laughter simply continued, and then, slowly, faded into the background hum of polite conversation, as if nothing untoward had happened. As if I hadn't just been eviscerated. I took a deep breath, a slow, deliberate one, trying to steady my racing heart. My face felt hot, then cold. My vision blurred for a moment, but then a strange clarity descended. I couldn't let them see. I couldn't give him the satisfaction of breaking me. With a strength I didn't know I possessed, I picked up the heavy platter of sliders and walked back into the living room. Alex met my eyes across the room, a triumphant, almost challenging glint in his. He was daring me to react, to confirm his narrative of me as overly emotional, sensitive, pathetic. The room quieted, just enough for the faint creak of the floorboard under my heel to echo in the sudden silence. I set the tray down on the coffee table, a delicate clink of ceramic against wood. And then I smiled. A genuine, if somewhat brittle, smile. "Enjoy the game, everyone," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the earthquake raging inside me. I turned and walked back into the kitchen, the silence of the room following me like a shadow. My hands, which had been shaking, were now oddly calm. I picked up my phone, opened the Notes app, and typed line 1. Item, reputation. Then, item, job security. Then, item, social circle. And finally, item, Ego. I hit save. My fingers hovered over the screen for a moment. Then I walked to the sink, poured myself a tall glass of water, and drank it slowly, deliberately, feeling the icy liquid travel down my throat. With every swallow, I felt the burning humiliation begin to transform, to crystallize into something cold, hard, and utterly unyielding. It was no longer just pain. It was purpose. That night, Alex slept soundly, oblivious, sprawled across the couch in a post-game night stupor. The rhythmic rise and fall of his chest was a stark contrast to the storm raging within me. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind a relentless cataloger of every single slight, every dismissive comment, every casual cruelty he'd ever inflicted. It wasn't just the charcuterie incident, or the pathetic comment. It was the way his eyes would subtly roll whenever I spoke with enthusiasm about a new project or a small promotion I'd earned. It was the insidious, "she's too emotional" comments he'd drop to our mutual friends, subtly undermining my professional credibility. It was the way he'd effortlessly hijack my stories at parties, twisting them, embellishing them, until he became the hero or the punchline, completely eclipsing my original narrative. Each memory, each sting, fueled a growing clarity. By the time the first sliver of gray light pierced through the blinds, casting long shadows across our bedroom, I had a 12-item list, a mental inventory of his transgressions, and a new mantra etched deep into my very being. I will not confront. I will corrode. Confrontation, I realized, was what he thrived on. It gave him a stage, an audience, an opportunity to deflect, to charm his way out. Or worse, to gaslight me into believing I was the problem. It would be a fleeting moment of catharsis for me, perhaps. But ultimately, it would serve only to reaffirm his power and my perceived weakness. No, that wasn't my style. My path was corrosion. My corrosion happens quietly, insidiously, molecule by molecule, until the entire structure, once seemingly solid, can no longer hold. It's a silent, relentless force, and it felt right. It felt utterly, terrifyingly right. So, with a cold resolve that surprised even me, I began my meticulous preparation. I didn't rush. I didn't act on impulse. Instead, I started Googling. Not how to get over a breakup, or how to heal from betrayal. Oh no. My searches were far more precise. Employment law blogs, workplace harassment documentation, signs of corporate plagiarism. I dove deep into the digital rabbit hole, screenshotting Slack logs, where Alex had subtly undermined colleagues, scrolling through Venmo memos that hinted at questionable expense reports, even digging through old email threads where his casual arrogance was on full display. Every seemingly insignificant breadcrumb, every stray comment, every corner he'd cut, I was collecting it all. I wasn't stalking him, not in the traditional sense. I was curating. I was building a case, assembling a meticulously crafted exhibit, and he, the unsuspecting artist, had provided all the material. The exhibit would open, I knew, and it would be a masterpiece of his own making. He just wouldn't realize it was curated until it was far too late. Monday morning arrived, crisp and cold, but I felt strangely invigorated, fueled by a purpose that had been simmering for days. My first target, Leo. Leo was the agency's art director, a quiet, gentle soul, prone to bouts of anxiety and a deep-seated desire to please. He was, in a word, perfect. He was also a good person, and I had to ensure my actions wouldn't genuinely harm him, only redirect his anxieties. I orchestrated a casual bump into in the elevator, timing it perfectly for our shared morning commute. "Hey, Leo," I said, feigning a slightly worried expression. "You know, I've actually been a little concerned about Alex lately." I paused, letting the implication hang in the air, allowing his naturally anxious mind to fill in the blanks. He just seems so stressed, always under so much pressure, you know? Leo, ever the empathetic one, nodded, his brow furrowing slightly. This was my opening. I then pulled out my phone, as if to check a non-existent message, and with practiced nonchalance, I angled the screen just so. On it was an old text, a screenshot I'd carefully selected from my curated collection. It was a message Alex had sent me months ago, a casual venting session about Leo's lazy kerning on a recent project. "Seriously, Margaret," the text read, "Leo's kerning is so bad, it's like he's typesetting with his feet. Pathetic." I let Leo's eyes linger on the screen for just a second too long, just enough for him to catch the damning words, to see his name, to feel that familiar sting of betrayal. Then, with a quick, almost apologetic movement, I pulled the phone away. "Oh, sorry," I whispered, my voice laced with a performative sympathy. He didn't mean it, of course. He was just having one of his moments. You know how he gets when he's under pressure. I offered him a weak, comforting smile, but my eyes held a different message. "I see what he truly thinks of you." Leo's face, usually so open, folded in on itself. A flicker of hurt, then confusion, then a slow, dawning understanding. He didn't say anything, but he didn't need to. The seed of doubt, of quiet resentment, had been planted. There was nothing overtly malicious in my actions, just a perfectly placed whisper of concern, a subtle hint of truth. And concern, as I knew, spreads faster than fire in a drought. It's an insidious thing, this quiet erosion of trust. The next phase of my careful demolition began with a high-stakes pitch. Our agency landed an incredible opportunity to bid for a major eco-friendly deodorant brand. A huge win, potentially worth millions. Alex, ever the glory hound, practically elbowed his way to the front, volunteering to lead the entire pitch presentation. He loved the spotlight, the chance to be the hero. What he didn't volunteer, what he conveniently forgot to mention, was a little detail from the previous summer. The fact that he had, with astonishing laziness, reused an old concept, a whole campaign framework, from a completely different client. He'd simply swapped out the logo, changed a few taglines, and called it fresh. It was a glaring act of intellectual laziness, a professional shortcut that bordered on plagiarism, and I, having worked on both projects, knew about it. This was my moment. I didn't need to expose him directly. I just needed to provide the right information to the right person at the right time. First, I meticulously forwarded the original, unedited deck from the previous client to my personal email, giving it the innocuous file name Reference Only Old Project, PPTX. Then, with the precision of a surgeon, I set up an anonymous Gmail account, creatively named Greenwashing Watcher. The morning of the pitch, just hours before Alex was due to present his brilliant new strategy, Greenwashing Watcher sent a single, devastating email to Evelyn, the ECD. Attached were two files, Alex's new presentation and my reference-only document. The subject line was simple, pointed, and utterly damning. Curious case of creative coincidence? Side-by-side comparison. The client, a sharp, environmentally conscious team, saw the similarity almost immediately. The air in the pitch room, I heard later, grew thick with awkward silence. The meeting ended abruptly, the potential multi-million-dollar campaign dead on arrival. Evelyn, a woman who valued integrity above all else, was furious. She didn't fire Alex immediately. He was too senior, too entrenched to dismiss without a mountain of paperwork and a potential legal headache. But she did issue a company-wide memo, a stern, carefully worded missive about the paramount importance of creative integrity and the unacceptable risks of intellectual borrowing. It was a public dressing down, thinly veiled but unmistakable. Alex kept his job, yes, but his prestige, his carefully cultivated image as the agency's creative genius, took a massive hit. That quarter's raise pool, usually a generous affair, inexplicably shrank, and the whispers started. Quiet at first, then growing louder, echoing through the halls and across Slack channels. Alex is losing his edge. He's not as innovative as he used to be. The corrosion had begun its work, slowly, subtly, eating away at his professional standing. Alex's parents, God bless them, adored their son. His dad, a retired Air Force colonel, was a man of unwavering principles and a deep respect for hard work and integrity. His mom, a high school civics teacher, believed passionately in intellectual property and the foundational principles of ethical conduct. They were proud, almost to a fault, constantly bragging about their son running the whole creative floor at a top Chicago agency. This was an image I couldn't attack head-on. That would be too crude, too obvious, and frankly, it would just make me look bitter. My strategy was far more subtle. I would let them assemble the puzzle themselves. Thanksgiving rolled around, a yearly pilgrimage to their perfectly manicured suburban home. As always, I volunteered to make my famous sweet potato casserole, a dish his mom particularly loved. The dinner table was a flurry of activity. Alex, predictably, holding court, regaling everyone with exaggerated tales of his professional triumphs. "You wouldn't believe the crunch time we had," he boomed, gesturing expansively with a drumstick. A last-minute deck that literally saved the quarter. He loved painting himself as the indispensable hero. I waited for a lull in the conversation, a natural pause, and then, with an air of mild curiosity, I turned to his dad. "Colonel," I began, using his preferred title. "I was just wondering, have you seen that local news segment they ran last week? The one about ad industry plagiarism? It was quite eye-opening." I kept my tone light, genuinely inquisitive. His dad, a man who consumed news like it was his duty, immediately perked up. "Oh yes, Margaret, I did catch that." Quite shocking, really, the lack of originality these days. Alex's mom, ever the civics teacher, clucked her tongue disapprovingly. "Intellectual property," she declared, her voice firm, "is the backbone of democracy and innovation. Without it, society crumbles." I said nothing about Alex. I didn't need to. The seed was planted, watered by their own deeply held values. I simply offered a sympathetic nod and turned back to my casserole. The conversation shifted, but I could almost feel the gears turning in their minds, connecting the dots I had so carefully laid out. 2 weeks later, the evidence of the corrosion was undeniable. Alex, fuming, showed me an email from his father. The subject line read, in stark, unyielding military precision, "Food for thought, son." Attached was an article about advertising agencies getting sued for recycling old concepts, complete with stern warnings about professional ethics. Alex ranted for 20 minutes straight about how out of touch his father was, how they just don't understand the pressures of the modern creative world. I listened patiently, offered a sympathetic hug, and inside, added item 13 to my ever-growing list. Parental doubt. The image he'd so carefully constructed for them, the one they cherished, was beginning to fray at the edges. Here's the thing about quiet revenge, about this slow, deliberate corrosion. You have to constantly monitor the blast radius. My goal wasn't wanton destruction. It was justice, a rebalancing of the scales. If good people got burned, if innocent bystanders suffered genuine harm, then I knew I'd have to pull back, reevaluate. It was a fine line, one I walked with meticulous care. I reviewed every step, every subtle nudge I'd made. Leo, for instance. My little whisper of concern had, surprisingly, sparked something positive in him. He'd channeled his insecurity, his anxiety about Alex's unspoken judgment, not into self-pity, but into a fierce determination to prove himself. He became more meticulous, more innovative, pushing the boundaries of his art direction. He even landed a prestigious industry award a few months later for a campaign that was lauded for its incredibly sharp design and unique visual language. He gained confidence, found his own voice, and stepped out of Alex's shadow. Far from being harmed, Leo had actually flourished, ironically. thanks to Alex's casual cruelty. The agency itself? The eco-friendly deodorant client, after killing Alex's plagiarized campaign, pivoted. They ended up going with a smaller, fresher, more genuinely innovative campaign from a different, younger team within the agency. A campaign that, because it was tailored from scratch, ended up saving them a significant $50,000 in production costs. So, the agency, too, ultimately benefited from Alex's professional setback, learning a valuable lesson about creative integrity and efficiency. Even Alex's parents weren't truly wrecked. They weren't devastated or heartbroken. They were just questioning. Their unwavering pride had been replaced by a nuanced, thoughtful doubt. They were seeing their son, perhaps for the first time, through a clearer, less idealized lens. They still loved him, I had no doubt. But the pedestal he stood on had cracked. My conscience, therefore, remained remarkably clear. I wasn't destroying lives. Not truly. I was simply adjusting the mirrors, painstakingly polishing them so that everyone could finally see the cracks that were already there, the flaws that Alex had so artfully concealed. I was just helping the truth shine through. January brought with it the annual agency networking cruise on Lake Michigan, a glittering event meant to foster camaraderie and celebrate the previous year's successes. It was an open bar, a pulsating DJ, and a massive Instagram wall for all the perfectly curated selfies. Alex absolutely loved this night. He thrived on the attention, the opportunity to mingle and play the charming, successful creative director. He spent hours preening in his new, expensive navy suit, meticulously spraying hair volumizer into his already voluminous hair, even practicing his signature TED Talk laugh in front of the mirror. He was preparing for his grand performance. I, on the other hand, chose to wear the exact same dress I'd worn the night he called me pathetic. It was a quiet, personal defiance, a silent statement to myself. He, of course, didn't notice. He was too consumed with his own reflection, his own narrative. By now, the corrosion was well underway, spreading through the agency's social fabric like a subtle, pervasive dye. Leo, emboldened by his recent award and the quiet validation he'd found, had casually shared Alex's lazy kerning text with 2 other designers on our team. What started as a private grievance had become a shared, knowing eye roll. Evelyn, ever the shrewd observer, was quietly, systematically, documenting every late timesheet Alex submitted, every missed deadline, every instance of delegated responsibility that should have been his. She was building her own file, a formal record of his declining performance. And then there was Maya, the bright-eyed intern whom Alex had once dismissively labeled window dressing. Maya had, quite organically, started a Slack channel called Women Creatives, a safe space where stories were swapped, advice was given, and frustrations, often subtly related to Alex's behavior, were aired. I contributed nothing to that channel, not a single word. I didn't need to. My work was done. The seeds had been sown, and the conversations were happening without my direct involvement. Halfway through the cruise, as the lights of the Chicago skyline twinkled against the inky blackness of the lake, the DJ, with a flourish, announced a trivia contest. "Time to test your advertising knowledge," he boomed. "Name the brand that used this slogan." The game proceeded, a fun, harmless diversion, until the final slide flashed onto the giant screen, and there it was. The old, recycled tagline. The one Alex had stolen. The one that had killed the eco-deodorant campaign. A ripple of confusion went through the crowd, quickly followed by a collective groan of recognition. Then from the back, a brave soul shouted, "Wait, didn't we pitch that last quarter?" The laughter that followed wasn't good-natured. It was sharp, knowing, and undeniably pointed at Alex, who stood frozen, a half-eaten mini quiche suspended halfway to his mouth. Evelyn, from her perch near the bar, simply raised an eyebrow, a tiny, almost imperceptible gesture that spoke volumes. Phones, of course, were already recording. Alex, ever the performer, tried to laugh it off, too loud, too forced, quickly downing his beer. He attempted a pivot, a deflection, but it was too late. The moment was captured, the damage done. By midnight, the video, hilariously captioned, "When your creative director recycles homework," had hit the agency's private Reddit board. By morning, the comment thread was a brutal roast, a flurry of memes and inside jokes that tore Alex's professional credibility to shreds. The best part? It wasn't my post. It wasn't my account. I was sound asleep by 10, dreaming of a quiet, undisturbed future. The unraveling, once started, moved with astonishing speed. Within days, the group chat Alex had painstakingly built for his inner circle, the one where he'd share his latest brilliant ideas and solicit adoration, went silent. The lively banter, the shared jokes, the constant stream of emojis, all dried up. Thursday game night, once a sacred ritual, was suddenly postponed indefinitely, then indefinitely again. Leo claimed scheduling conflicts, citing a sudden surge in his workload. Others simply ghosted, their excuses vague and unconvincing. Alex's Instagram, his carefully curated public persona, began to bleed followers. 30, then 50, then 100. Small numbers in the grand scheme of things, perhaps. But numbers don't measure the chilling, deafening silence that descends when your social circle evaporates. At work, the professional humiliation continued its slow, steady burn. Evelyn, with a cool, clinical efficiency, pulled Alex from the Super Bowl-level spot he had been coveting for months, the one he believed was his birthright. Instead, she assigned him a banner ad refresh project, the very task he had once so cruelly mocked me for doing. It was a calculated, poetic blow, a stark reminder of his diminished standing. He raged at home. Oh, how he raged, pacing our living room like a caged animal, chain texting his dwindling list of friends, who now responded only with single, non-committal emojis. He'd throw his phone down in frustration, muttering about how everyone was out to get him, how they just didn't understand his vision. I, the ever-sympathetic partner, would offer soothing noises, pour him a cup of calming chamomile tea, and when he wasn't looking, quietly archive another screenshot of his increasingly erratic behavior. The corrosion was nearing its completion, and the structure was groaning under the strain. One particularly quiet evening, weeks after the cruise debacle, he slumped onto the edge of our bed, the weight of his unraveling visibly heavy on his shoulders. The usual bravado, the practiced arrogance was gone, replaced by a raw vulnerability I hadn't seen in him before. He looked small, defeated. "I don't get it, Margaret," he mumbled, his voice hoarse, devoid of its usual bluster. "I feel like everyone's just turned on me, like I'm the joke." For the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes, not the calculated, performative fear of a man trying to manipulate, but a deep, existential dread. He wasn't looking for sympathy. He was looking for an answer, a reason for his sudden, inexplicable downfall. In that moment, a powerful urge rose within me, a temptation to confess, to lay bare my meticulously executed plan, to finally tell him the truth. I could have offered comfort, a soft word, a gentle lie that would have eased his suffering. But then, I remembered the laughter. I remembered the word pathetic. I remembered the silent, chilling humiliation. And the urge passed, replaced by a steely resolve. Instead, I looked at him, truly looked at him, and asked, my voice calm, almost clinical, "What do you think you've done to deserve it, Alex?" The question hung in the air, a devastating, unanswerable echo. He stared at me, his eyes wide, stunned, as if I had spoken in a foreign language. He had no answer. He had never truly considered the consequences of his actions, only the immediate gratification. The mirror I had so carefully polished was finally reflecting his own image back at him, unfiltered, unvarnished. I didn't wait for a response. I simply stood up, walked out to the living room, opened my notes app, and with a quiet click, ticked every single item green. The list was complete. My work was done. The universe, it seemed, has a funny way of delivering justice. Just as Alex's reputation was cooling like a downed server, sluggish and unresponsive, I received an offer. A senior role. At a competing agency. Across town, yes, but crucially, in the same building. Literally just a few floors up. Better salary, more creative control, a team that valued collaboration over competition. It was everything I had quietly, meticulously worked towards. The culmination of 2 years of honing my skills, building my portfolio, and discreetly networking. I accepted without a moment's hesitation. My departure was as quiet and methodical as my revenge. There was no drama, no shouting match, no tearful confrontation. While Alex continued to stew in his self-pity, wondering why his world had imploded, I quietly packed my things. I sorted through years of shared memories, separating what was mine from what was ours, leaving behind only the ghosts of a life that no longer served me. The final act of my departure was deliberate, symbolic. I left his engagement ring on the kitchen counter, glinting innocently under the morning light. Beside it, a small yellow post-it note. My final message, concise and cutting. You were right. I'm great at tiny banner ads. Now I'm great somewhere else. I blocked his number, forwarded my mail, and took the L train to a new apartment, a new neighborhood, a new life. No drama, no histrionics, no screaming. Just silence. A silence so profound, so utterly complete, that it rang in my ears. A glorious, liberating symphony. Last I heard, the corrosion continued its work. Slowly, relentlessly, eating away at the remnants of Alex's life. His team at the agency missed their quarterly targets, a direct consequence of his increasingly disengaged and uninspired leadership. Evelyn, true to her word, had finally put him on a formal performance improvement plan, a professional death sentence in our industry. His college buddies, the very ones who had laughed at his cruel jokes, still met for game night. But they met at a different apartment now, and Alex was conspicuously absent. His parents, after much deliberation, and what I imagine were many difficult conversations, sold their boat. The boat they proudly told everyone was, for Alex, as eventual wedding. The cash, once earmarked for his future, was now, I heard, being used to fund their own retirement dreams, a quiet, poignant redirection of hope. None of this was public scandal, no front-page news. It was far more insidious. It was erosion. I, meanwhile, am thriving. I lead a 7-person creative pod at my new agency, a team that respects my vision and values my input. When I speak in meetings, no one laughs unless I intend the joke. My ideas are heard, my contributions celebrated. Thursdays, instead of making buffalo dip for a room full of Alex's friends, I attend salsa classes, something Alex had always deemed too flamboyant for me. I spin, I dip, I step to the beat of music I choose, surrounded by people who celebrate joy and movement. It's a different kind of rhythm, a different kind of life, and it's entirely mine. So that's how I destroyed a reputation, without ever raising my voice, without a single public outburst, without giving him the satisfaction of a direct confrontation. Did it fix everything? No, not entirely. Some nights, I'll admit, I still taste the phantom flavor of that buffalo dip humiliation, the sting of that laughter. The memory lingers, a scar tissue reminder of how easily one's worth can be dismissed. But I also taste something far sweeter, something infinitely more satisfying. Agency. Agency over my story, over my career, over my intrinsic worth. I reclaimed my narrative, not by fighting his, but by dismantling it, piece by careful piece. I proved to myself, and to anyone who would pay attention, that I was not pathetic. I was powerful. If you're out there, nursing a wound from public mockery, from a dismissal that cut you to the bone, I want you to ask yourself, what's your list? What quiet, precise move can you make today, right now, that your future self will thank you for? Because revenge isn't about rage, not truly. It's not about becoming the monster who hurt you. It's about refusing to be the punchline ever again. It's about reclaiming your power, your dignity, and your voice. Even if that voice is a whisper of cold, calculated truth. If this story lit a fire in you, if it resonated with that part of you that craves justice, then smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below. What would you have done in my shoes? I read every single one. And hey, if you've got your own karma-cooked tale, your own story of quiet triumph, I'd absolutely love to hear it. Until next time, keep your head high, your resolve firm, and your receipts saved. You never know when you might need them.